Caseus. The Inner Storm. Chapter 5. Caseus sat down. His heart raced as he looked at the horrifying image of Skywalker in the projector. Panic raced through him as he began to hyperventilate.
Caseus. Caseus, look at me. Breathe.
That's him. That's Skywalker. Dravok pushed Juro aside and grabbed Caseus by his shoulders and shook him.
Get a grip and look at me.
Caseus slowed his breathing and looked from Juro back to the projector.
Are you certain that's him?
Caseus looked down and nodded. During the war, Sarah and I were sent to Kelja to find an oracle. She told us she'd foreseen the fall of the Jedi, and we had to learn how it would come. Grievous got involved and killed her, but she showed me something before she died. The same thing I saw as I was lying on the steps of the temple dying. The fire. The flames. And I heard a noise. That noise coming from that thing. Skywalker was leading the attack on the temple. He was the one who killed Sarah and countless other Jedi. It's all adding up now. Skywalker is Palpatine's apprentice.
The Sith follow the rule of two. Dooku was his apprentice before. Then Skywalker killed him during the Battle of Coruscant.
Cassius stared into the frozen image of the fallen Chosen One.
Then we at least have some idea what we're up against. Juro, what do you think that suit does?
Juro looked carefully at the image.
Well, if this really is Skywalker, no doubt it's heavily armored. I'm seeing some devices on the chest and belt. It may be some sort of life support. It would explain the breathing.
Life support?
Maybe the Chosen One isn't as powerful as we thought. If the clone is right and he needs a suit to function, someone or something must have caused those injuries.
Cassius thought back to his duel with Anakin. He was outclassed in every sense of the word. Who could have bested a force like him? Dravok stood.
Whatever. He's still our target. And you still have a lot of training to do. We're going to double our efforts moving forward. Sleep and eat between lessons when needed. The rest of our time will be spent training. Clone.
Juro looked at Dravok.
I have a job for you. A job?
Dravok removed a pouch of credits from his belt and handed them to Juro.
Take my starfighter. Head to the nearest inhabited planet. Gather provisions, new clothes, and whatever we might need. While you're out there, do some digging. Find out anything you can about our adversary. Hit up any cantinas, bars, or low-life hangouts you have to. Return within the week. Are you sure that's a good idea? My face is pretty recognizable. It's worth the risk. Get what you need here and get going. As for you, boy, meet me in the hangar in 20 minutes. It's time we started some more intensive training.
Cassius nodded as Dravok left the shuttle.
What do you think, sir?
I don't think we have many options right now. We're almost out of food, and I'm not eating any more of those bugs. Find out what you can, but be as inconspicuous as possible. You have the coordinates to get back here. If anything comes up, contact me immediately and I'll come help. Juro looked uneasy.
Okay. If you think this is the best course of action, I trust you.
Cassius stepped outside and helped Juro make his preparations. Soon, he was ready and sat in the cockpit.
Good luck, Caseus.
Good luck, Juro.
May the Force be with you.
Juro smiled and closed the cockpit before taking off into the air and flying out of view into the dark sky above. Cassius was already exhausted and in pain from the day's lesson, but he knew Dravok wouldn't let him rest until he was physically unable to continue. Cassius walked back down into the cruiser and found Dravok in the hangar.
First, I need to make sure you're not too rusty with your saber. We're going to spar. Prepare yourself.
Caseus looked at Dravok as the two of them drew their lightsabers. Dravok rushed at Caseus, who took a Sarisu stance, and began to deflect Dravok's strikes. The burns from the sun made maneuvering his saber difficult, but he pushed through the pain and held his ground.
You're playing too defensively. Attack me!
Caseus pushed Dravok back and swung his saber at Dravok's legs. He countered with a quick parry and backhanded Caseus across his face. Anticipating the next attack, Caseus ducked, avoiding Dravok's attack before kicking him in the back of his knee and briefly staggering him before his next blow was intercepted. Their fight raged on. Caseus was becoming exhausted, and his defense was getting sloppy as Dravok pushed harder.
Don't lose focus. Your opponent doesn't care how tired you are, and neither do I. I'm not trying to lose focus. You're holding back. You're not drawing upon your anger. Think, Caseus. Think about your master. How she died saving your sorry hide.
Caseus gritted his teeth.
Shut up. Think about every Jedi who met their fate at his hand.
Caseus clenched his fist tightly around the hilt of his saber as their blades caught in a bind. Dravok's eyes stared directly into his.
Think about Sarah. Stop talking! Think. Think about how scared she must have been in her final moments. How she wished she could have seen you one last time. Think!
Caseus was seeing red as he cried out in anger and pressed harder, pushing Dravok off before unleashing a series of powerful strikes against him. His movements and strikes were fueled by his anger. He didn't see Dravok in front of him. He saw Skywalker, and he wanted revenge. Caseus kept up his attacks as he laid into Dravok's defenses with every ounce of anger in his heart. Dravok was soon defending purely by instinct as his breathing became labored. Caseus saw this and pressed harder, pushing himself to his limit. Soon, Dravok was cornered. Unaware of his surroundings, he lost his footing over a piece of starfighter debris and fell onto his back, holding his blade up in a desperate attempt to defend himself. He struck at Dravok's blade again, and again, and again, finally breaking through his guard and swinging downward.
Caseus, no!
Caseus snapped out of his enraged state and barely came to just as his blade sliced Dravok across his cheek, the former Jedi crying out in pain. Caseus breathed heavily and stood in shock, staring at his opponent as he held his cheek and gasped for air. That voice. He nearly killed Dravok. Something he had so often dreamt of doing. If it hadn't been for that voice in his head. Caseus turned off his saber and fell onto the ground, sitting, trying hard to regain his composure as Dravok sat up. Dravok, I didn't... Dravok sneered at him.
Shut your mouth. That is the strength you need.
No, I couldn't control myself. I nearly gave in to the dark side completely.
But you didn't. You know how to harness your rage. The next step is controlling it. That power, that strength that you get when you draw upon your anger. It's the key to killing him. But only if you learn to master it. If there was ever one truth that the Jedi taught, it's that the dark side is corrupting. And if you let it take you completely, there's no coming back.
Caseus sat and thought. Those things you said, they released this fire inside me. But I didn't see you. I saw him.
You allowed your anger to control you, instead of letting it empower you. It's a very fine line. One that will see you fall completely if you aren't careful.
Caseus nodded and looked at his fist, still clenched in a death grip around his saber. What now?
Take a minute to compose yourself. Then we start again.
Meanwhile, Juro was making his approach to Socorro. If his memory served correctly, it was a smuggler's paradise. No doubt he'd be able to get provisions and, if he looked in the right places, information on the Empire and Skywalker. As he landed the starfighter, he was careful to make sure it was sufficiently out of sight from prying eyes. The last thing he needed was someone spotting a Jedi fighter in the area. Hopping out of the cockpit, he looked through his macro binoculars and spotted an outpost 3 clicks ahead. Removing his armor, he fastened an old tunic over himself and started walking. In his mind, all he could think about was how exactly he got into this whole mess in the first place. Why he wasn't affected when Order 66 was initiated. He had his suspicions, but they would have to wait. Upon reaching the outpost, his memory was confirmed. The place was crawling with blaster-toting criminals from every conceivable race and species. He stopped by a vendor and used a few of the credits he was given to purchase ration packs, produce, and a few articles of clothing.
Anything else? Yeah. I've had a rough couple of weeks. Where does a guy get a drink around here? Tahavi's pub right down the street. Mind yourself, though. Lord of dodgy types in that place.
Juro raised an eyebrow and took what he had purchased before heading down the street. Seeing a wide domed building, he walked closer and saw a drunken weekway losing his lunch into a waste bin.
Yep, this looks like the place.
Stepping inside, the foul stench of alien odors, foreign cuisine, and tobacco smoke filled his nostrils. Sitting at a table, he looked around at the different inhabitants, keeping his distance to avoid suspicion. A bloated bartender in a dirty apron made his way over.
What'll it be? Corellian ale.
The bartender snorted and spat before heading back to the bar. Juro listened in to different conversations. Talks of trade routes, encounters with local authorities, and run-ins with pirates. Nothing too useful.
Well now, what's a soldier of the Republic doing all the way out here?
Juro's eyes widened as he turned his head and saw a stout Rhodian accompanied by a weekway and a Duro. Juro slowly reached for his blaster.
Easy, friend. No need to cause a commotion. May I sit?
Juro kept his hand on his blaster, but nodded as the Rhodian sat across from him.
I hope I don't seem too forward. I have a knack for noticing strange occurrences. Is it so strange to see a former soldier getting a drink? Not particularly. But then, you're no normal soldier, are you?
Juro narrowed his eyes.
Who are you? The name's Rondo. And you are? My name is none of your business, Rhodian. You may want to consider altering your tone, trooper. Especially considering what I've just heard about you from my men. What? That ship you arrived in on the outskirts. That's a Jedi craft, is it not? Now, I'm not exactly the brightest star in the galaxy, but I'm to believe the Jedi were all destroyed. How exactly does a clone come across such a rare craft?
Juro quickly tried to think of an excuse.
I want it. Indeed. Something else you should know about me is that I'm quite good at noticing a liar when I see one. What do you want from me? Well, my men and I are what you might call merchants of priceless antiques. That ship of yours would fetch quite a handsome price. It's not for sale. Everything has a price, my friend. Ships, droids, fugitives.
Juro's eyes narrowed even more as he gritted his teeth.
I wonder how much the Empire would pay for a runaway clone in a Jedi craft. Is that a threat? You call it a threat. I call it thinking out loud. You're not in a favorable position, friend. I always get what I want. And I want that ship. You can either sell it to me, or we can find another means of acquiring it.
Juro looked at the other two aliens on either side of the table. He was boxed in.
Wait, you collect priceless artifacts, right? That is indeed our line of work. What would you say if I told you I can take you somewhere? A place filled with undiscovered treasures, free for the taking. I'd say you were bluffing. But go on. An old Jedi cruiser, from the Old Republic. full of things you won't find in any Toydarian's junk shop. You know where we could find such a vessel? Yes. If you come with me and keep quiet, I'll take you there. I'm not so easily fooled, clone. How do I know you will uphold your end of the deal? Like you said, I don't have many options. It's either play ball or get turned over to the Empire.
Rondo looked to his men before turning back and nodding.
We'll go along with this proposal. Make no mistake, however. Should you try anything funny, the Empire will be the least of your worries. Deal. Come with me.
Back on Blengiel, Caseus and Dravok continued their training. The suns had begun to rise as they fought. Tired and hungry, Caseus was struggling to keep up the fight. It would have been a problem if Dravok were not also tiring. Dravok, I think it's time to rest. If we keep going like this...
No rest until I say so.
Caseus sighed in exasperation as he pressed his attack. This continued on for several more hours until both Caseus and Dravok could hardly continue. Still want to keep going? Dravok sneered.
Fine. 2 hours. Go rest and regain your strength. I'll wake you when it's time to continue.
Not that I care if you work yourself to death, but you're no good to me if you don't rest either.
Oh, so you're in charge now? Don't get smart with me, Caseus.
I wouldn't have to if you just listened to reason. We've been training nonstop for 30 hours now. We need to sleep. Otherwise, training is useless. So I'm going to the shuttle to rest. If you want to waste your time pushing yourself until you collapse, be my guest. I really don't care. Caseus left Dravok and walked upstairs to the hull of the ship, only to see Dravok's starfighter land beside the medical shuttle. The cockpit opened as Juro hopped out. See? That wasn't so bad, was it?
Don't speak too soon. We have company.
Company? From the sky above, a large junk vessel appeared and sat down on the cruiser. As the landing ramp opened, Rondo stepped out, accompanied by 7 other men in his crew.
It looks like you were telling the truth, clone.
Rondo.
Caseus?